Maybe you are sitting with the quiet, persistent ache of believing that your internal world is simply too loud for the people around you. You have been running through the halls of your own mind all day, trying to polish the silver and rearrange the furniture before any guests arrive. But tonight the house is empty, and your hands are still trembling with the need to keep everything in order. You feel the heavy, familiar weight in your chest, a tightness that suggests you are falling behind, even when you have nowhere to go. You want to stop, to set down the heavy load of your daily performance, but there is a voice that whispers you must keep going, that you must keep fixing, and that rest is something you haven't yet earned the right to touch. The air in this room is cool, and the floorboards are still holding the last faint warmth of the day. You can feel the texture of the fabric beneath your fingers, or perhaps you are simply noticing the way the shadows are stretching across the far wall as the world outside slips into its own deep, velvet slumber. There is no urgency in these shadows. They do not ask you to change or to justify your presence. They simply exist, and in their quietude, you might find a sliver of space to just breathe. You are not broken because you are tired. You are not failing because you find it hard to turn off the engine of your thoughts. What you are feeling right now is not a sign that you have lost your way, but rather a sign that you have been carrying a fire that was never meant to burn at such high intensity for so long. You have been trying to sustain a blaze that eats its own fuel, and now you are witnessing the exhaustion of the wick. This is not a state of collapse. It is a moment of potential transformation. We often fear that if we stop, if we finally let our guard down and quit the constant maintenance of our inner and outer lives, we will simply disappear or fall apart. We cling to the anxiety because it feels like a structure, a framework that keeps us from being overwhelmed by the vast, open reality of existence. But here is the paradox we will explore tonight. The mind does not become peaceful because you force it to be silent. It becomes peaceful when you stop treating every internal flicker as a command you must obey. You think your restless thoughts are the walls that protect you, but they are actually the very things keeping you from the cool, dark comfort of the rest you crave. You do not need to solve your whole life tonight. You do not need to rewrite the history of your choices or draft the blueprint for your next year of living. You are safe enough to soften. You are safe enough to let the tools fall from your hands. We are going to learn how to tend to your inner flame, not by feeding it more wood, but by learning when to let it dim. Maybe you have felt the strange, biting guilt that comes when you finally try to do nothing. You sit or you lie down, and immediately the mind starts listing the things you should be doing, the people you should be helping, the versions of yourself you should be perfecting. It feels as if your worth is tied to a constant motion, a relentless cycle of producing and achieving. But if you watch that guilt closely, you will see it is not a teacher. It is a shadow. It is an old, ingrained habit that tells you life is a ledger that must be balanced before you can sleep. Tonight, we will gently peel back the layers of that demand. We will look at the way you handle your own humanness. We are going to explore the difference between a life that is being lived and a life that is being managed. You have been managing yourself so tightly that you have forgotten how to simply inhabit the vessel of your own body. Take a moment now to notice the sensation of your body against the mattress or the chair. Feel the weight of your bones. Your bones are solid, and they do not need your permission to support you. You have carried yourself through the entire day, through every interaction and every quiet moment of doubt, and now your body is asking for the chance to put that burden down. Give yourself the small, simple grace of letting your shoulders drop just a fraction of an inch further. If your jaw is clenched, let it loosen. If your toes are curled, let them stretch. Nothing is required of you here. No one is watching your performance. There is no test to pass, and there is no grade for how well you let go. If thoughts arise, let them be like the distant hum of traffic outside a window. You know the cars are there. You know they are moving, but they are not in your room. They do not have to become your internal weather. You are the space they are passing through, and you can choose to remain still while the movement happens elsewhere. We are going to move into this quiet space together, but we will not rush. We will go slowly, because a mind that has been sprinting for years cannot be forced into a sprint of relaxation. It must be invited. It must be wooed with kindness and repetition. You have spent your energy well, even if it feels like you have been running in circles, and you deserve the silence that is waiting for you at the end of this journey. Let the promise of this night be simple. You are allowed to be unfinished. You are allowed to be a work in progress that is currently taking a long, deep breath. The things you could not solve today will still be there tomorrow, but they will look different in the morning light when you have allowed your perspective to settle. Tonight, you are not a project. You are not a repair job. You are a living being, and living requires rest as surely as it requires breath. As we prepare to walk further into the orchard of this teaching, let your awareness stay soft and unfocused. Do not try to analyze what you hear. Do not try to build a mental map of where we are going. Just let the words wash over you. Like cool water over smooth river stone, the teaching will find its own place in you. You do not need to memorize it or force it to stick. Your heart already knows the shape of this rest. It has been waiting for the moment you decided that you were finally ready to stop building and start simply being. You have spent so much energy trying to maintain the integrity of your own walls. You have been the sentry on the rampart, watching the horizon for any sign of change or challenge. But look around you now. Quiet. The room is quiet. The light is dim. The walls of your home are steady. The earth beneath the building is solid. You can lower the spear. You can step down from the wall. You can trust that the world will continue to spin, even if you are not actively holding it together for these next few hours. If you find that your mind is still racing, do not judge it. Do not add the second layer of suffering by thinking you are failing at the practice of letting go. A racing mind is just a mind that has developed a very fast rhythm. It does not mean you have done something wrong. It only means you have a great deal of momentum. We will acknowledge that momentum, and we will offer it a place to set itself down. We will take the objects of your concern, the worries, the plans, the regrets, and we will treat them not as monsters to be fought, but as simple, everyday tools that have become too heavy to hold. In a moment, we will enter the first story of our journey together. It is a story about a young student who, like you, found it impossible to believe that he could ever be enough without being constantly productive. It is a story that will help you see the way you have been burning your own oil. And perhaps, in the watching, you will find the strength to finally close the lamp and let the room go dark. There is nothing to fear in the dark. It is the natural home of the rest you have been denied for so long. You are doing perfectly well, simply by being here, listening, and allowing yourself the luxury of this pause. The path ahead is gentle, and it does not ask for anything more than your willingness to let your breath guide you back to center. In a high valley, where the air was always thin and cool, there sat a monastery that looked like a natural extension of the granite cliffs. The monks who lived there were known for the steady, unhurried way they tended to the temple's needs. Among them was a young apprentice named Kavi. Kavi had been tasked with a responsibility that seemed simple, yet it occupied every waking moment of his attention. It was his job to maintain the oil lamps in the main hall. He was the one who ensured that the copper vessels were always filled to the brim. He polished the copper until it shone like a new coin. He trimmed the wicks with a sharp blade so the flames would burn bright and unwavering through the long, dark hours of the mountain night. Kavi lived in a state of constant, low-level agitation. He was terrified of the darkness. He felt a deep, gnawing guilt whenever he saw a flame flicker or dip, as if the failure of the light was a direct reflection his own character. If a lamp went out, he did not see a simple lack of oil. He saw a personal catastrophe. He saw evidence that he was not disciplined enough, not attentive enough, and not worthy of the life he led in the temple. He moved through the halls with his shoulders hunched, his eyes darting from wick to wick, his hands always reaching for the jar of oil. He spent his days in a cycle of frantic filling. He poured and trimmed and poured. And when the night finally came, he found he could not sleep because he was listening for the sound of a lamp dying. The master of the temple was a man named Tenzin, whose movements were so quiet that he often seemed to appear in a room without Kavi ever hearing him walk. Tenzin spent his days in the courtyard, working with a small, blackened oil lamp that sat on a wooden stump. It was not a grand lamp. It was dented and aged, the copper dull with years of use. Tenzin would often sit beside it, staring at the small, steady flame as if he were waiting for it to speak. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, where Kavi had filled every single vessel in the temple, he found Tenzin sitting in the courtyard. The sun had long since slipped behind the peaks, and the valley was swallowed by a deep, impenetrable blue. Kavi walked over, his back aching from the weight of the oil jugs. He stood there for a moment, waiting for the master to acknowledge him, but Tenzin only looked at the little lamp on the stump. The flame was small, quiet, and perfectly still. It was not struggling, and it was not frantic. It simply burned. Kavi could not hold his tongue. He had spent his day trying to make the temple lamps burn with a fierce, brilliant intensity, but they kept consuming the oil, and he kept feeling more exhausted. He gestured to the lamp on the stump. "Master," he said, his voice tight with the strain of his own worry. "How do you keep your lamp burning with so little oil? I have filled the hall lamps 3 times today, and yet I feel I am losing the battle against the dark. My hands are stained with oil. My back is bent, and I am still afraid that the light will fail." Tenzin looked up, his face lined with the deep, soft wrinkles of someone who had spent decades watching the weather change. He did not answer immediately. He reached out and picked up the small copper lamp. He held it out toward Kavi. The copper was warm to the touch, and the oil inside was almost entirely gone. Yet the flame remained, a steady golden point of clarity in the gathering gloom. "Sit," Tenzin said, gesturing to the bare earth beside him. Kavi sat, his legs still twitching with the urge to stand up and check the lamps in the hall. He looked at the flame, then at the empty jar of oil sitting nearby. He felt a strange pang of envy. He wanted to know the secret of that flame. He wanted to know how Tenzin could be so indifferent to the consumption of the oil. Tenzin finally spoke, his voice as soft as the wind, moving through the valley grass. You think the purpose of the lamp is to hold the oil, Kavi. You think that as long as the copper is full, you are safe. But the oil is not the light. The oil is the cost of the light. You have spent your entire day trying to hoard the cost, so much so that you have forgotten to notice the light itself. He held the lamp closer to Kavi's face. "Observe the wick," he said. Kavi leaned in. The wick was not charred or frayed. It was clean and straight. "You trim it with such violence," Tenzin noted. "You attack it because you are afraid it will fail you. You are like a man who tries to hold his breath all day, terrified that if he exhales, he will never be able to inhale again. But look at this flame. It does not demand. It does not panic. It simply accepts the oil that is offered, and it gives back light in exact measure. When the oil is gone, the flame will return to its source. That is not a failure. That is the completion of a cycle." Kavi felt a tightness in his chest, a sensation he had lived with for so long that he had mistaken it for his own heartbeat. He looked at his own hands, calloused and stained, and then back at the calm, golden glow on the stump. He felt the weight of his own relentless effort pressing down on him, not like a duty, but like a shroud. "What if I stop filling them?" Kavi asked, the question sounding dangerous and fragile in the silence. "Then the lamps will go out," Tenzin said, his expression unchanged. "And if they go out?" Kavi persisted, his voice trembling. "Then the temple will be dark," Tenzin replied. "And the dark is not an enemy. It is a place where things that are tired can finally sleep." Kavi looked at the copper lamp again. He noticed for the first time that Tenzin was not holding it tightly. His hand was cupped around it, supporting it, but his fingers were relaxed. He was not gripping the copper. He was simply offering his hand as a resting place for the vessel. Kavi's own hands, by contrast, felt like claws. He realized that he had been gripping his tasks as if he were holding onto a rope over a precipice. He had been so focused on not falling that he had never once looked around to see where he actually was. The master reached out and placed the lamp in Kavi's lap. It was light, almost weightless. Kavi found himself holding it, his heart pounding a rhythmic, frantic beat against his ribs. He felt the temptation to stand up, to run to the hall, to check the level of the oil in every single lamp, to make sure nothing had shifted, nothing had dwindled, and nothing had been lost. The urge to act was like a physical pull, a hook deep in his stomach, dragging him toward the door. Tenzin simply watched him. He did not move to stop him, and he did not move to lead him. He just watched, his eyes reflecting the tiny, dancing light in Kavi's lap. Kavi looked down at the flame. He saw the way it danced, tiny and golden, responding to the slight movement of his own breathing. He had always tried to keep his temple lamps absolutely still, shielding them from every breeze, terrified of a single flicker. But this flame was alive. It moved. It changed. It was responsive to the world around it. It was not a static, frozen thing. It was a process. He sat there for a long time, listening to the silence of the high valley. He realized that he was listening for the sound of his own thoughts, waiting for the inevitable voice that would tell him he was wasting time. He waited for the judgment to arrive, for the voice that would list the things he should be doing, the maintenance he was neglecting, the danger of the darkening hall. But the voice did not come. Or perhaps it did come, but it sounded very far away, like the echo of a bell in a neighboring valley. He looked at the copper vessel in his lap. It was just a cup of metal and oil. It was not a source of safety. It was not a guardian against the dark. It was just a container for a moment of light. Kavi took a breath, a long, slow breath that seemed to pull the cool night air deep into his chest. For the first time, he did not try to hold the air. He did not try to hoard it. He let it fill him, and then he let it go. He watched the flame in his lap as he exhaled. It did not dim. It stayed exactly as it was, a steady, honest glow. He had spent his whole life trying to manage the duration of his light. He had thought that if he could just control the variables, if he could just be perfect enough, he could exist. Outside the nature of things, he thought he could outrun the night, but sitting there, with the warm copper in his hands and the dark valley stretching out into infinity, he felt a strange, quiet sense of relief. The dark was not going anywhere. It was vast, it was deep, and it was perfectly peaceful. And he was not going anywhere either. He was just here, in the middle of a moment, holding a little bit of light that was doing exactly what it was meant to do. He didn't need to be the keeper of the light, he realized. He just needed to be the one who was present to see it. Tenzin stood up, his robes rustling softly in the stillness. He didn't say anything. He didn't offer a final bit of wisdom or a set of instructions. He simply began to walk back toward his quarters, his footsteps silent on the packed earth. Kavi stayed where he was. He stayed with the lamp. He stayed with the dark. And for the first time in his life, he didn't feel the need to stand up and do something, to make the world behave. He just sat, and the flame sat with him, and the mountain night stood guard over them both. The guilt, that sharp, insistent thorn in his side, began to soften. It was still there, but it was no longer a command. It was just a feeling, and feelings, he was starting to understand, were as transient as the oil in the cup. They were meant to be used, not kept. They were meant to burn, not to be stored away in a locked room. He sat until the flame finally sputtered, dimmed, and then quietly went out. He didn't rush to relight it. He didn't search for the oil jar. He sat in the darkness, and he found that he was not afraid. The dark was soft. It was quiet. It was like a blanket that had been waiting for him to finally put it on. He closed his eyes, and the world, the hall, the lamps, the copper jugs, the endless todo lists, the constant need for maintenance, all of it faded, leaving only the sound of his own breathing and the vast, peaceful presence of the night. He was finally, truly, in the dark, and he was finally, truly, home. This story is not telling us to abandon our duties or to walk away from the things that matter. It is not asking us to stop caring about the light in our own lives. It is showing us something much quieter and much more essential. You see, the young apprentice spent his days running a race against the dark, and in that sprint, he lost the ability to simply watch the flame he was trying to protect. He believed that if he stopped pouring, if he stopped trimming, if he stopped controlling every variable of the process, then the world would immediately dissolve into a chaos of shadow. He was carrying a deep, with unspoken belief that his own value was tied to the constant, frantic activity of his hands. When we hold on to our struggles with that same white-knuckled intensity, we are not really living. We are managing. We are performing. We are constantly checking the level of the oil in our own spirits, terrified that if we dip too low, we will be found lacking. But notice the Buddhist insight hidden within that simple copper lamp. The oil is a resource, not an identity. When you feel that you must constantly justify your existence through achievement, you are trying to use the oil to bribe the darkness. You are trying to prove that you are substantial, that you are strong, and that you are useful. But the lamp does not care about your resume. It only cares about the wick, the suffering we feel, the tight, anxious chest, the racing thoughts at 2 a.m, the feeling that we are perpetually behind, often lives in the gap between what we are doing and what we think we must be doing to remain safe. You are adding a second layer of hardship to your life by judging the natural cycle of your own energy. Think of the way you view your own exhaustion. When you feel tired, do you welcome it? Do you see it as the evening of your day, the natural cooling of the flame? Or do you see it as a nuisance, a failing, a sign that you are not capable enough to keep the lamps of your life burning bright forever? Most of the pain you carry is not the actual event of the day. It is the narrative you spin about the event. It is the internal judge that says, I should have done more. I should have been faster. I should have been steadier. This judgment is the extra weight. It is the second arrow. After the first one has already landed, the first arrow is life itself. It is the work, the relationship, the disappointment, the simple human experience of being a body that tires and a mind that wanders. That is the first arrow, and it is part of being alive. But the second arrow is the way you talk to yourself about that experience. It is the way you use your own intellect to punish yourself for not being a machine. The old master Tenzin knew that the flame was not a monument to be preserved. It was a process to be experienced. You are not a statue of a person who is supposed to be perfect. You are a process of changing, growing, waning, and resting. When you hold your life with such a desperate grip, you cannot feel the warmth of the light you are creating. You are too busy trying to keep the vessel from emptying. But the light is meant to be spent. That is its nature. Your energy is meant to be used. And then it is meant to be replenished by the dark. There is no shame in the flickering. There is no catastrophe in the cooling. Consider the way the apprentice was so afraid of the dark that he could not see the beauty of the light. We do the same. We are so afraid of the moments when we are not producing, not achieving, or not looking successful that we ignore the sacred reality of the present moment. We are so busy building our defense that we forget to inhabit our life. But notice how Tenzin held the lamp. He did not let it go, but he did not strangle it. He offered his hand as a resting place. This is what it means to live with an open heart. You do not abandon your responsibilities, but you stop trying to own the outcome of your effort. You do the work, you trim the wick, you provide the oil, but you accept that the flame will dance as it chooses, and eventually it will dim, because that is what flames do. You may be worried that if you stop trying to control every detail, you will fail. But what if you stop trying to force the light to be brighter than your current oil allows? What if you treated your own capacity for work as a finite, precious thing, rather than an infinite resource that you must squeeze dry? When you stop trying to bribe the darkness, you discover that the darkness was never an enemy. It was just the space where you were finally allowed to stop being a hero and start being a human. You have been trying to make the lamp burn forever, but the lamp was designed to burn for. You have been trying to keep the room fully lit, but the room was designed to hold the silence of the night. This is not a failure of character. It is an acceptance of reality. The suffering comes when the mind creates a rule that says, I am only good if I am burning, and I am only safe if I am blindingly bright. Break that rule. Let the flame be small. Let it be steady. Let it be honest. You do not need to be a bonfire to be seen. You only need to be real. When we talk about letting go, it does not mean becoming indifferent. It does not mean you stop loving your work or stop caring about your path. It means you stop adding the layer of fear to the work. When the apprentice was worried about the oil, he was not serving the light. He was serving his own anxiety. He was projecting his fear into the future, imagining a hall full of dead lamps and a reputation in ruins. He was not present with the flame in front of him. He was living in the hall of his own imagination. You do the same when you lie in bed and replay the conversations of the day, or when you rehearse the challenges of tomorrow. You are living in a hall of your own construction, and you are terrified of the lamps going out. But look at where you are. You are here. The room is quiet. You are safe. You have done the work that was given to you today, and that is all that was ever required. The future is a dream, and the past is a memory, and neither of them has the power to light your current path. Only this breath, right now, has the power to sustain you. There is a profound, grounded strength in the ability to sit with an empty lamp. Most people will run away from the emptiness. They will reach for distraction, for comfort, for anything that will fill the void and drown out the silence. But if you can sit with the empty vessel and realize that you are still here, still breathing, still whole, then you have found something far more valuable than a full jar of oil. You have found the part of you that does not depend on the light. You have found the witness. This awareness is the space that remains when the drama of your life goes quiet. It is the capacity to notice the fear without becoming the fear. You can see the urge to panic. You can feel the physical tension of the need to fix everything, and you can simply acknowledge it. You can say, "I see you, fear. I see that you are trying to keep me safe, but I am not going to let you drive the boat tonight. I am going to sit here with the lamp, and I am going to breathe." This is the path of compassion. It is the ability to look at your own suffering and not turn away. It is the willingness to be gentle with yourself. When you feel tired, or lost, or small, you don't have to judge the apprentice for his fear. You don't have to judge yourself for yours. You only have to witness it. You only have to bring the quality of your attention to the feeling, and then let it be. The more you watch, the less power the fear has over you. It becomes just another sensation, like the cool air on your skin or the sound of the wind in the trees. It is not a monster. It is a messenger, and it is telling you that you are ready for a different kind of rest. The teaching here is not to kill the flame or to let the light go out because you are lazy. It is to find the harmony between the activity of the day and the rest of the night. It is to understand that you are the one who holds the lamp, not the one who creates the light. You provide the conditions, and the rest is allowed to happen. You do your part, you show up, you offer your best, and then you trust that it is enough. You trust that the world is much larger than your personal effort, and that you are allowed to rest in that truth. You are moving closer to a deeper understanding, but the lesson has not yet fully bloomed. It takes time for the mind to settle into this new shape. Do not worry if you still feel the pull of the oil jars. Do not worry if the guilt still lingers. That is part of the process. You are unlearning a lifetime of habits, and habits do not disappear in a single evening. They dissolve, slowly, like sugar in warm water, until one day you realize the taste of the struggle is no longer there. For now, just notice the rhythm of your own heart. It is steady, it is reliable, it does not need you to monitor it. It does not need you to fill it. It just knows how to beat and how to rest and how to continue. Breath after breath. This is the wisdom of the body, and it is the wisdom of the path. You are already supported by a rhythm that is older than your thoughts. You are already held by a stillness that is deeper than your worry. You are already and always exactly where you need to be to begin again. Now that you have walked the path of the young apprentice, let us bring this teaching into the quiet room where you are resting. You have heard the story of the copper lamp, and perhaps you can feel the warmth of that small, steady flame within your own chest. You do not need to do anything with this feeling. You do not need to analyze it or force it to change your life tonight. You only need to be present with it, as if you were sitting on the courtyard floor beside the master, simply watching the light. Take a slow, gentle breath and let it move all the way down into your belly. There is no need to make the breath deep or perfect. Just let it be. A natural rise and fall, like the tide coming into a harbor. As you exhale, imagine you are releasing the need to be a guardian of your own history. You have been carrying so much, and tonight you are allowed to put the burden down. If your shoulders are still tight, let them drop. If there is a knot of tension between your eyebrows, let it smooth out into the darkness. You are safe here, and you have nothing left to prove. Bring your attention to the space behind your eyes. Maybe you can see a thought there, a flicker of worry, or a fragment of a memory that has been playing on a loop. It might be a small thing, a minor detail you think you need to fix, or it might be a larger, more persistent concern. Do not try to push it away. Do not try to solve it. Just notice it. Acknowledge that it is there, moving through the halls of your mind like a shadow. It is just a thought. It is not a command. It is not an emergency. Now, imagine that you are holding the small copper lamp from our story. Feel the weight of the metal in your hands. Feel the warmth of the oil inside. You are not holding it with a tight, desperate grip. You are cradling it, supporting it with your open palms. In this lamp, there is enough space for your worry. If you are ready, gently place that thought into the lamp. Imagine it becoming a wick, a small part of the light. You are not losing the thought, and you are not ignoring it. You are simply changing the way you relate to it. You are taking it out of the center of your life, where it has been burning you, and placing it where it can be seen, clearly and calmly, as part of the process. Watch the flame. See how it responds to your breath. Does it flicker when you think of your worry? Does it settle when you return to your steady inhale? You are the keeper of this flame, but you are not the one who determines its path. You provide the vessel, and you offer your presence, but you do not need to control the dancing of the light. Let the flame be whatever it needs to be tonight. If it is small, let it be small. If it is bright, let it be bright. There is no right way to burn. If your mind wanders, and it will, for that is the nature of the mind, do not scold yourself. Do not tell yourself you are failing at this practice. A wandering mind is just a mind that has been sprinting for too long. Gently, with the kindness you would offer a tired child, bring your attention back to the lamp in your hands. Notice the warmth of the copper again. Notice the stillness of the courtyard. You are not running anymore. You are sitting. You are resting. You are giving your awareness the chance to stop being a weapon and start being a harbor. You might notice that the guilt of resting tries to creep back in. That is all right. It is a familiar voice, and it is trying to keep you safe in the only way it knows how, by keeping you busy. But you can look at that guilt and recognize it for what it is. It is not the truth. It is just an old habit, a leftover piece of the day that has lost its purpose. You can say to yourself, I hear you, but I am not going to follow you tonight. I am going to stay here with the lamp, and I am going to breathe. If it feels right, Place one hand over your heart. Feel the steady pulse beneath your palm. That is the rhythm of your life, and it does not require your permission to continue. It has been beating while you worried. It has been beating while you worked, and it will continue to beat as you sleep. Trust that rhythm. It is your true teacher, and it is far more reliable than the lists you make in your mind. You do not need to arrive anywhere tonight. You do not need to reach a state of perfect emptiness or total silence. The practice is not about achieving a goal. It is about the quality of your attention. Even if you only notice that you were lost in thought for a few seconds, that is enough. That moment of noticing is the moment of awakening. That is the moment the apprentice realized he was holding the lamp. You are already succeeding because you are willing to stop and look at what is happening inside you. If you feel a sense of heaviness, let it settle. Imagine that the heaviness is sinking into the earth beneath your bed, flowing out of your body like water down a drain. The earth is strong. It can hold your weariness. You do not have to carry it for the trees, or for the ground, or for the night. You can let it drain away, leaving your limbs feeling light, porous, and soft. Your body is becoming like the old monk's robes, loose and comfortable, fitting the shape of the moment, without any resistance. There is no need to make anything happen. If your mind is still busy, let it be busy. If your thoughts are still loud, let them be loud. You can be like the courtyard wall, standing still and unmoved while the wind passes through the trees. The wind has its own business, and the wall has its own nature. You are the wall. You are the stillness that allows the movement affected by it. Take another breath, and this time, imagine the breath is not just moving in your chest, but filling your whole body, like water filling a vessel. Let the breath reach your toes. Let it reach your fingertips. Let it reach the very top of your head. You are being nourished by the air itself. You are being supported by the very act of existing. You do not have to work for this breath. You do not have to earn this oxygen. It is given to you freely, as naturally as the sun rising or the moon crossing the sky. If a specific fear about tomorrow arises, imagine it as a drop of oil you are putting into the lamp. Watch it dissolve into the fuel. It is no longer a separate, dangerous thing. It is part of the light that sustains you. You are taking the very things that cause you the most stress and transmuting them into the means of your own illumination. This is the alchemy of awareness. This is how you take back your power from the things that were keeping you awake. You are doing a brave thing by being here. It takes a great deal of courage to stop the momentum of a lifetime and sit in the dark. Most people will never try. Most people will live their whole lives in the rush, convinced that if they stop, the world will end. But you are here, and you are learning that the world is much more resilient than your anxiety. You are learning that the light you were chasing was already in your hands, waiting for you to slow down enough to notice it. Stay with the image of the lamp for a few more moments. Notice the texture of the copper, the smell of the oil, the way the flame creates a soft, golden circle of light in the dark. This is your circle. This is your home. You can return to this image whenever you feel the need to pause, whenever you feel the urge to run, whenever you feel the weight of the oil jugs pressing down on your shoulders. You have this lamp. You have this light. And most importantly, you have the ability to sit, to breathe, and to trust the cycle of the night. Nothing will be lost if you let go for a little while. Nothing will be ruined if you stop, tending to the things you think you must guard. The temple will still be there in the morning, and the hall will still be there and the work will still be waiting for you. But you will be different. You will be rested. You will be softer. You will be a little more like the master in the courtyard, content to sit, content to watch, and content to let the light be enough for this moment. Let the image of the lamp slowly fade, not because you are pushing it away, but because it is dissolving into the natural darkness of your relaxation. You don't need the object anymore. You have the feeling. You have the sense of your own capacity to rest, and as you let the image go, let yourself fall a little deeper into the bed, a little further into the embrace of the night. You are doing well. You are exactly where you are meant to be in this process of becoming quiet, and there is nothing left for you to solve until the sun finds you again. In a different part of the mountains, far from the monastery of the copper lamps, there lived a sculptor named Jin. Jin was a man of great skill, known for carving statues that seemed to hold a breath of life within the cold, unyielding stone. He was also a man who lived in a state of perpetual, quiet agony. He believed that if he stopped working, he would lose his place in the world. He carved from before dawn until the stars were bright above the jagged peaks. He was always looking for the one perfect stone, the one that would allow him to carve a figure that was truly, finally, complete. Jin's hands were mapped with the scars of his craft, his skin grey, with the dust of granite and marble. He lived alone in a workshop that smelled of damp earth and crushed minerals. He had a specific chisel, a heavy thing with a handle of worn oak that he believed carried the secret to his success. He held it so tightly that his knuckles were permanently swollen. Aching in the cold of the mountain nights, he thought that if he ever lost this tool, his talent would evaporate into the thin air, leaving him an empty, useless shell. One summer, a drought struck the valley. The streams dried to white ribbons of stone, and the village below struggled for water. The villagers came to Jin, begging him to carve a figure of a guardian for the dry spring, hoping it would bring the water back. Jin agreed, driven by a mixture of genuine compassion and the terrifying need to prove his worth once more. He chose a massive, stubborn boulder of blue basalt. It was a difficult, knotted stone that seemed to fight his every strike. For weeks, Jin labored. The sun beat down on the courtyard, and the heat radiated from the stone until it felt as if he were carving a piece of the sun itself. He found a knot in the basalt, a place where the stone was harder, darker, and more resistant than the rest. According to his training, he should have chiseled around it, cutting away the imperfection to preserve the smooth flow of the sculpture. But the knot was deep. If he cut it out, the guardian would be hollowed, weakened, perhaps even shattered. Jin felt the familiar panic rising in his chest. He saw the knot as an obstacle, a failure of the stone, and a threat to his reputation. He hammered at the knot with a frantic, rhythmic violence. He was trying to force the stone to be what it was not. He was trying to make it perfect, seamless, and flawless. But the harder he hit, the more the basalt seemed to push back. The oak handle of his chisel became slick with his sweat, and his own muscles began to tremble with a fatigue that went deeper than his bones. An elderly traveller passed by the workshop one afternoon. He was a man with a wooden staff and eyes that seemed to look right through the stone and into the space. Behind it, he stopped to watch Jin for a long time. He saw the way Jin's jaw was clamped shut, the way his shoulders were hiked up toward his ears, and the way his every blow was landing with a desperate, heavy force. Jin noticed the traveller and shouted at him, his voice ragged with exhaustion. "Do you see this knot? This stone is cursed. It refuses to take the shape I need. It is ruining the guardian." The old traveller leaned on his staff. He did not look at the knot. He looked at Jin's hand. "Why do you hold the tool as if you were trying to kill it?" he asked. Jin stared at him, confused and angry. "I hold it to get the work done. I hold it so the stone will yield." The traveller walked into the shade of the willow tree that bordered the courtyard. "The stone does not need to yield to your anger," he said. "The stone only needs to be heard." He sat down in the dust and began to watch the mountain breeze moving through the leaves. Jin wanted to tell him to leave, to go find a place where people weren't busy with the serious work of survival. But there was something in the old man's stillness that stopped him. Jin looked back at the basalt. He raised his chisel to strike the knot again, but his arm froze in the air. He looked at his hand. He looked at the white, bloodless grip he had on the oak handle. He felt the pain radiating from his knuckles, a sharp, buzzing ache that travelled up his arm. He realized with a sudden, sinking clarity that he wasn't carving the stone anymore. He was fighting his own frustration, and the stone was merely the witness to his war. Jin let his arm drop. It felt heavy, like a limb made of lead. He didn't drop the chisel, but he shifted his grip. He loosened his fingers. He opened his palm just enough to let the air touch the skin he had been shielding. For so long, he stood there, leaning against the cold basalt, and he realized he was shaking. It was the shaking of a man who had been holding his breath for a lifetime. He looked at the knot again. He didn't try to ignore it, and he didn't try to conquer it. He looked at it as if he was seeing it for the first time. It was dark, yes. It was hard, yes, but it was also part of the stone. It was the place where the basalt had been forged, in the deep, ancient heat of the earth. It was not a flaw. It was a history. Jin reached out and touched the knot with his bare fingertips. It was rough, but it was not hostile. He took a breath. He didn't force it into his belly, but he let it come in, slow and unhurried. He felt the cooling of his own heart. He raised the chisel again. This time, he didn't strike with the intent to crush. He struck with the intent to listen. He tapped the surface. He felt the vibration travel through the oak, through his palm and into his own awareness. He felt the stone tell him exactly where it wanted to move. It wasn't a dialogue of force. It was a collaboration of presence. Jin began to carve around the knot, but he changed the design. He didn't try to carve a smooth, perfect guardian anymore. He carved the knot into the shape of a shield held by the figure. He integrated the very thing he had been fighting into the design of the thing he was creating. The guardian became more rugged, more weathered, and more grounded because of the knot. It looked like it had seen the weather of many centuries. It looked real. He worked for hours, but he did not work with the frantic, clawing intensity of before. He took breaks. He sat under the willow tree. He watched the light move across the courtyard. He let himself be thirsty without screaming at the drought. He let himself be tired without judging his fatigue. The old traveller remained under the tree, his presence a quiet, steady anchor in the heat. Jin found that he didn't need to prove anything to him. He didn't need to demonstrate his mastery or hide his struggles. He just worked. As the sun began to sink toward the peaks, painting the sky in colours of bruised plum and burning gold, Jin finished the sculpture. It was not the perfect, classical guardian he had envisioned at the start. It was something else. It was a figure that stood with a quiet, enduring strength, holding the knot of the stone like a treasure. Jin set his chisel down on the earth. He didn't pick it up to clean it. He didn't rush to check the seams of the carving. He stood back and looked at what he had made. He saw the knot, and he saw his own handprints in the dust, and he saw the way the shadows of the willow leaves played across the surface of the basalt. He felt a deep, resonant silence in his own body. He realized that the stone hadn't changed as much as the sculptor had. He had been so obsessed with the idea of a perfect guardian that he had forgotten to be a person who was allowed to breathe while he worked. He had been treating his own life like a knot that needed to be cut out, rather than a part of the design that made him who he was. The traveller stood up and walked over to Jin. He looked at the guardian for a long time. "You have carved well," the old man said. Jin looked at his scarred hands. "I almost ruined it," he whispered. "I almost fought it, until there was nothing left but dust." The traveller nodded. "We all think the knot is the end of the story," he said. "We all think the hardness is a sign that we have failed. But the stone only becomes a guardian because it has learned how to carry its own weight." Jin leaned back against the willow. He felt the rough bark against his shoulders. He felt the cooling air as the valley night began to reach up toward them. He realized he wasn't thinking about the next commission. He wasn't thinking about the drought. He wasn't thinking about the money or the fame or the opinion of the villagers. For the first time in years, he was just a man standing in a courtyard at the end of a long, difficult day. He was allowed to be tired. He was allowed to leave the work unfinished, even if it had reached a state of wholeness. He looked at his hands. One more time. They were trembling, but not from frustration. They were trembling with the simple, raw relief of having laid down a burden he had carried for half a lifetime. He understood then that the chisel was just a tool. It had no power over him. It had no power to define him. He was the one who held the tool, and he was the one who could decide to put it down. The old traveller walked out of the courtyard and disappeared into the shadows of the mountain path. Jin didn't call after him. He didn't try to thank him. He just watched him go, a quiet, fading shape in the deepening blue. Jin walked into his workshop. He didn't light a lamp. He didn't start another project. He walked to the corner where he kept his sleeping mat, and he lay down on the cold floor. He watched the shadows of the willow tree dancing on the ceiling. He felt the ache in his muscles, a heavy, honest weariness that felt like a gift. He realized that he didn't have to fix the valley. He didn't have to fix the stone. He didn't even have to fix himself. He just had to be present for the end of the day. The knot was part of him. The scar was part of him. The struggle was part of him. And all of it was allowed to rest. He closed his eyes. He didn't try to control the rhythm of his breathing. He let it find its own speed, slow, shallow, and quiet. He felt the darkness outside the workshop window, vast and indifferent and perfectly peaceful. It wasn't a dark that was empty. It was a dark that was full. It was the same dark that held the stars, and the mountains, and the stone, and the sculptor, all in the same gentle, unyielding embrace. He wasn't a hero, and he wasn't a failure. He was just a man who had finally stopped trying to carve his life out of fear, and in the stopping, he had finally found the space to be free. The night deepened. The sounds of the valley settled into a soft, murmuring silence. Jin let the thoughts of his work dissolve, one by one, like ripples fading on the surface of a pond. He wasn't holding the chisel anymore. He was holding nothing at all. He was just resting in the awareness of his own existence. A quiet, steady flame that had finally learned that it didn't need to consume the world in order to burn. And in that stillness, he drifted deeper and deeper into a sleep that felt like coming home. You have heard the story of the sculptor and his struggle with the knot of basalt, and perhaps you can see your own life mirrored in those jagged, resistant textures. We spend so much of our time trying to carve away the parts of our experience that feel hard, dark, or inconvenient. We approach our own lives as if we are trying to force a perfect shape out of stubborn material. We believe that if we just strike hard enough, if we just stay focused enough, if we just polish our actions enough, we can finally create a version of ourselves that is free from knots, free from friction, and free from the inherent hardness of being human. But this is the central irony of our exhaustion. The harder we strike, the more the stone resists us, the more we try to force our internal reality into a smooth, idealized form, the more we end up bruising our own hands and wearing down our tools. We have been taught that peace is a state where everything has been worked out, where every problem is solved, and where every fear has been chiseled away. But this is not peace. This is simply a form of static, rigid perfection that can never truly exist in a world that is always shifting, always aging, and always changing shape. Consider the mechanism of your own suffering. When something difficult happens, a disappointment, a moment of fatigue, a mistake you regret, that is the first layer of experience. That is the raw stone. It has weight, it has edges, and it has a texture that you cannot choose. This is the reality of your life, and it is something that everyone encounters. But then the mind steps in. The mind, in its desire to protect you, starts to wrap that experience in a heavy, tight layer of narrative. It says, I should have prevented this. It says, if I were a better person, this would not be happening. It says, this is a sign that I am not enough, or that I am falling behind, or that I am fundamentally broken. This is the extra weight. This is the second layer, the one you add yourself. It is not the event that creates the most suffering. It is the resistance to the event. It is the way you hold on to the past, replaying the conversation until the words lose their meaning and turn into jagged shrapnel in your heart. It is the way you rehearse the future, imagining every possible failure until you are paralyzed by the weight of things that have not yet occurred. It is the way you use shame as a way to fix yourself, thinking that if you just dislike yourself enough, you will eventually become the person you think you need to be. You are turning your pain into an identity. You are deciding that your struggles are proof of your inadequacy, rather than recognizing them as simple, inevitable parts of the landscape. But what if you stopped carving out the knots? What if you began to integrate them? The sculptor Jin discovered that he did not need to remove the basalt knot to make a beautiful guardian. He only needed to change his design to include it. He needed to stop viewing the resistance as an enemy and start viewing it as a foundation. This is what it means to change your relationship with your experience. You are not trying to remove the difficulty from your life, because that is impossible. Life will always have its knots. Life will always have its moments of heat, its moments of drought, and its moments of unyielding stone. Peace is not found by making the world or yourself flawless. Peace is found by opening your hands, relaxing your grip on the chisel, and accepting that you are a person who is currently experiencing a moment of hardness. When you feel the need for approval, Ask yourself who you are trying to impress. Is it a real person? Or is it a ghost of an expectation you created years ago? When you feel the need to control every outcome, notice the physical sensation of that control. It lives in your shoulders, in your jaw, in the way you hold your breath. It is a form of holding on, and it is exhausting you, but you can release that holding. You can choose to be a person who shows up, does the work with presence and kindness, and then allows the outcome to be what it is without needing it to be a testament to your worth. Fear of uncertainty is just the mind's way of saying it wants a map for a country that is still being built. You do not need a map to move through your own life. You only need the ability to take one step and then another. You do not need to know where the path will end. To trust the ground beneath your feet. The ground is here. It is solid. And it is enough for this moment. When you stop rehearsing the future, you find that the present is much larger, much softer, and much kinder than you had imagined. Self-judgment is perhaps the most persistent habit of all. It is the voice that tells you that you are not resting correctly, that you are not healing fast enough, or that you are still carrying too much. But look at that voice. It is just another thought. It is just another ripple on the surface of your awareness. It does not have the power to define you unless you grant it that power by believing it. You can notice the judgment. You can acknowledge the pain it causes, and you can let it be without following its commands. You do not have to argue with it. You do not have to fix it. You just have to see it for what it is. A passing movement in the vast, quiet space of your own consciousness. Think of your life as a vessel that is constantly being filled by the events of the day. Some of these events are light and clear, like water. Some are heavy and dark, like stone. You have been trying to sort them, trying to keep the dark out and the light in. But this is a losing battle. The vessel is meant to hold everything. It is meant to be a place where experience happens. When you stop resisting the contents of the vessel, you find that the vessel itself is indestructible. It is the space that remains, and that space is peaceful by its very nature. The Buddhist path points to this space. It teaches us that we are the sky, not the clouds. The clouds are the worries, the tasks, the knots, and the fears. They move, they change, they darken, and they dissipate, but the sky remains. The sky is never harmed by the clouds, no matter how heavy or storm-ridden they may be. You are the sky. You have always been the sky. You have simply forgotten your own nature because you have been so busy looking at the clouds, trying to fix them, trying to move them, or trying to understand why they are there. Stop looking at the clouds and start resting in the space that holds them. When you feel the weight of a thought, do not try to delete it. Simply notice it. Let it drift through your awareness like a cloud, drifting through the sky. You do not need to do anything with it. You do not need to analyze it or justify it. It is just a thought. It is not you. When you feel the urge to judge your own pain, stop and acknowledge the softness of your own heart. It is the very fact that you feel this difficulty that shows you are alive, and it is your willingness to meet it with kindness that shows you are on the path of wisdom. You do not need to be a hero. You do not need to be a finished statue. You just need to be someone who can sit with the difficulty, look at it without flinching, and remain steady through the process. Everything you are currently feeling is a part of the design. The fatigue is part of the design. The longing for rest is part of the design. The knot of worry that you are currently holding is part of the design. When you accept that these things belong here, in this moment, you stop fighting the reality of your own life. And in that stopping, the suffering begins to dissolve. It is replaced by a sense of belonging, a sense that you are exactly where you are, doing exactly what you are doing, and that it is okay for it to be this way. You are learning to move from a life of management to a life of presence. You are learning to stop being the one who guards the gate and start being the one who lives in the garden. There is so much beauty in the garden, even in the parts that are overgrown or wild or shaded by the trees. You don't have to prune it all back. You don't have to make it look like a park. You can let it be a garden. You can walk through it. You can feel the soil under your feet. You can smell the dampness of the earth. And you can enjoy the shade. This is the shift that changes everything. It is a shift from the head to the heart, from the concept of living to the experience of being. You are not a project. You are a living, breathing existence. You are a momentary constellation of breath and thought and feeling. And it is all temporary, and it is all fleeting, and it is all incredibly precious. You don't have to control it. You don't have to own it. You just have to witness it with a steady and compassionate eye. Stay with this feeling of stillness. It is not an absence of thought, but a presence of awareness. It is the feeling of having finally set down the heavy load of your own expectations. You are here, you are resting, and you are beginning to see that the peace you wanted was always available, tucked into the very moments you were trying to fix. You are doing well. Just breathe and let the truth of your own being settle into the quiet of the night. You are not trying to reach a destination. You are simply learning to arrive where you already are. This wisdom does not exist in the mountains of the past. It lives in the small flickering moments of your Tuesday afternoon. You are already practicing this, even if you are doing it with a heavy heart. Consider the way you handle the simple act of waiting. Perhaps you have sent a message to someone you care about, and the screen of your phone remains dark. In that silence, your mind begins to build a house of stories. It tells you that you have been forgotten, or that you have offended, or that your value is currently being weighed and found wanting. You feel the physical pull in your chest, the urge to reach out again, to apologize, to check, to fill the silence with noise. In that moment, you are holding the chisel with white knuckles. You are trying to force the stone of the other person's time to move at your speed. But if you stop for one breath, if you look at the phone not as a gauge of your worth, but as a simple tool, you might see the knot for what it is. You are feeling the natural ache of human connection, and that is a beautiful, vulnerable thing. The suffering comes only when you add the layer of judgment. It comes when you decide that this silence is a verdict on your soul. If you can simply notice the pull, if you can feel the anxiety without turning it into a story about your unworthiness, you are already carving with a lighter hand. Maybe you are lying in bed, the lights are out, and your thoughts are still walking through the rooms of tomorrow. You are rehearsing conversations you haven't had yet. You are solving problems that may never exist. This is you trying to polish the stone before you have even found it. You think that, if you think enough, you will be safe from the uncertainty of the next day. But you are not polishing the stone. You are wearing your spirit thin against the grindstone of the future. The next time you find yourself doing this, notice the tension in your jaw. Notice how your body is preparing for a fight that isn't happening. You do not need to solve the tomorrow that hasn't arrived. You only need to navigate the breath that is currently leaving your lungs. When the mind tries to pull you into the future, imagine you are setting down the chisel. You can choose to be a person who is resting in the dark rather than a person who is performing in the theatre of your imagination. You are allowed to be unfinished. You are allowed to be a work in progress that is currently taking a long, deep, and necessary break. Think of the way you sometimes pretend to be okay when you are actually feeling heavy. You smile at your colleagues. You nod at your friends. You perform the rhythm of a person who has everything under control. Inside, you are like the sculptor, trying to hide a knot of basalt under a layer of dust. You are terrified that if someone saw the knot, they would see the failure. But the knot is the most interesting part of you. It is the history of where you have been and the evidence of how much you have weathered. When you pretend, you are cutting yourself off from the only thing that truly connects you to others, which is your shared human experience of having knots. Next time you feel that pressure, take 1 extra second before you answer. You don't have to be a statue of stability. You can be a human who is experiencing a moment of weight. You might say, I am feeling a bit tired today, or I am finding this a little challenging right now. You do not need to reveal your whole soul to the world, but you can stop lying to yourself. Being real with your own experience is the first step toward letting go. It is the moment you stop trying to convince the world that you are made of flawless, smooth granite. You may also feel a deep, nagging guilt when you finally decide to rest. You look at the things you have not done, the emails you have not sent, the parts of the house that are not clean, and you think that your value is tied to the completion of these tasks. You feel like a failure for taking a moment to breathe, but your value is not a ledger that needs to be balanced. You are not a machine that is failing because it requires maintenance. You are a person, and your need for rest is a fundamental part of your biology. It is not an indulgence. It is a necessity. Try to look at your rest as an act of discipline. It is a form of respect for the tool you are using to walk through this life. A sculptor who never sharpens his chisel, who never oils the handle, who never lets the stone sit, will eventually lose the ability to create anything at all. By resting, you are not giving up. You are preserving the very thing that allows you to show up for the people and the projects you love. You are choosing to be a person who works with awareness rather than a person who works out of a desperate need to avoid being seen as lazy. Often you might compare yourself to others, looking at their polished surfaces and feeling like your own stone is too rough, too knotted, too slow. But you are only seeing the outside of their work. You do not see the knots they are carving, the hours they spend trembling with their own doubts, or the moments they spend in the dark, wondering if they are enough. Comparison is just another way of trying to carve someone else's stone. It is a waste of your effort and a distraction from the beauty of your own design. Stay in your own courtyard. Focus on the stone in front of you. It is the only material you have to work with, and it is more than enough. When you feel the need for approval, ask yourself what you would do if no one were watching. If you were the only one who saw the guardian you were carving, would you still carve it with care? Would you still pay attention to the grain of the basalt? If the answer is yes, then you are doing it for the right reason. You are doing it because the work itself is meaningful, not because you need the applause to feel real. You are the witness to your own life. That is the highest form of approval you can earn. You will have moments of friction tomorrow. There will be people who don't understand you, tasks that feel too heavy, and times when the stone of your daily life fights back. That is expected. It is part of being human. But when you feel that friction, try to breathe before you react. Use that 1 second of space to ask yourself if you are trying to force the stone, or if you are trying to listen to it. You might find that the struggle is not in the situation, but in the way you are gripping the handle of your own expectations. Do not be afraid of the knots. They are not signs of your incompetence. They are the unique textures of your experience. When you find a knot in your day, stop. Breathe. Look at it. Feel the weight of it. Then decide to carve around it, or through it, or to incorporate it into a shape that is beautiful because of its history. You are the sculptor, but you are also the stone. You are the one who is doing the work, and you are the one who is being shaped by the process. This is not a project you finish. It is a life you inhabit. There is no day where you will wake up and find that all the knots are gone, and the stone is perfectly smooth. There will always be more to carve, more to learn, and more to understand about the nature of the material. But that is not a cause for despair. It is a cause for celebration. It means that you will always be a living, changing, unfolding work of art. You can care about your work without letting the outcome consume you. You can be dedicated to your path without turning that dedication into a whip for your own back. You can be a responsible, loving, contributing human being and still allow yourself to be soft. These are not opposites. They are the two sides of the same stone. You are doing the hard work of living, and you are doing it with a level of courage that you rarely acknowledge. Before you let your eyes close for the night, notice the simple, miraculous fact that you are still here. You have carried your stone through another day. You have met the knots, you have navigated the heat, and you have survived the pressure. You don't have to carry any of it into the dream. You can leave the chisel in the workshop. You can wash the dust from your hands. You can lie down and trust that the stone will be there in the morning, and that you will be ready, not because you forced it, but because you allowed yourself the dignity of a rest that is honest, deep, and free. You are not a statue. You are the space where the sculpting happens, and that space is entirely, perfectly quiet. The work is quiet now. The sculptor has laid down his chisel, and the dust of the day has begun to settle in the corners of the workshop. You do not need to check the stone for imperfections anymore. You do not need to measure the angles of your own life to see if they meet the standard you set for yourself when the sun was high and the pressure was loud. That work belongs to the daylight, and the daylight has long since folded its wings. It is vast, it is dark, and it is entirely still. Your body is like the basalt guardian in the courtyard. It is solid, it is enduring, and it has carried its own weight through the heat of the day. Now it is time for the stone to cool. Let your limbs grow heavy, sinking into the earth beneath your bed. Let the muscles that held the tools of your worry release their grip. There is nothing to carve tonight. There is nothing to shape. There is only the long, slow return to the silence that existed before you ever picked up a tool. The flame of your awareness, which was once a bright, flickering intensity in your chest, is dimming to a gentle, steady glow. You are not losing the light. You are letting it rest within you, warming the dark like an ember in a protected hearth. The knots you feared, the resistance you fought, the hardness you tried to polish away, they are all just part of the stone. They are part of the history of your presence. In the dark, they do not weigh anything at all. In the dark, they are simply part of the mountain. Breathe. Let each breath be a little slower than the last. You are not bringing in more information. You are not trying to learn anything new. You are letting go of the need to understand, the need to justify, and the need to defend your own existence. You are simply letting yourself be held by the night, which knows how to support you without ever asking for a reason. The darkness is not a void. It is a vessel. It is the large, open space that holds the stars and the valleys and the sleepers and the dreamers, and it is big enough to hold you, too. Imagine the workshop door is closing. The hinges are silent. The tools are resting in their places, their work finished for this turn of the world. You are not leaving behind anything precious. You are leaving behind only the tools of your struggle, and you can pick them up again if the morning demands them. But for now, they are unnecessary. For now, you are not a sculptor. You are not a guardian. You are not a fixer of things. You are just a breath moving in the quiet, and that is a complete and beautiful thing to be. The room is dim. The edges of your vision are softening, blending into the velvet shade of the night. Let the thoughts that remain be like the shadows of willow leaves on the stone, faint, shifting, and entirely harmless. You do not need to follow them. You do not need to know where they go. You can let them pass through the space of your mind without ever attaching yourself to their path. You are the space. You are the stillness that allows the night to breathe. If a flicker of tomorrow touches your mind, see it as a light passing on a distant ridge. It is far away. It has no power over the quiet in this room. You are tucked safely into the center of your own experience. The stone has stopped fighting the chisel. The hand has opened completely, and the fingers are relaxed and still. You are not waiting for anything to happen. You are not expecting any further change. You are in the heart of the rest you have earned. Not through your effort, but through your simple presence in the dark. Everything that happened today is becoming a memory. Every word, every encounter, every pulse of anxiety is settling into the deep foundation of the past. It cannot reach you here. It cannot demand your attention. You are beyond the reach of the to-do list, and you are beyond the reach of the judge that lives in your mind. You are becoming as quiet as the sleeping mountains, as steady as the cold basalt, as soft as the velvet night that wraps around your shoulders. You have learned that the struggle was never about the perfection of the form, but about the quality of your presence while you carved. You have learned that the knots were not your enemies, but your teachers, and now you can leave them be. You can trust that the stone will remain and the light will return, and you will be exactly as you need to be when the morning comes. For now, there is only the silence. For now, there is only the breath. For now, there is only the weightless, floating peace of being entirely, deeply, and beautifully unfinished. Let the final edges of your focus dissolve. Let the name you call yourself drift away like a whisper in the wind. Let the memories of the day turn into the patterns of a dream that does not require you to solve it. You are safe. You are held. You are resting in the very space you were always trying to guard. If the sculptor could finally walk away from the stone and find the peace of the night, what does it mean for the part of you that was so afraid to put the chisel down?